Emma Rivera pulled the elastic band from her dark hair, letting the waves fall freely around her shoulders as she finally stepped out of City General Hospital. The fluorescent lights had been her only companion for the past 14 hours, and now the soft glow of street lamps felt like a gentle embrace. Her scrubs, once crisp and white at the start of her shift, now bore the invisible weight of countless patients, endless procedures, and the relentless pace of the emergency department. At 28, Emma had mastered the art of disappearing into her work. She moved through the hospital corridors like a ghost in white, efficient and reliable, but rarely seen as anything more than the nurse from night shift. Her colleagues respected her skills, patients trusted her gentle touch, but Emma often wondered if anyone truly saw her as Emma the person, rather than Emma the professional. The night air carried the scent of rain and possibility as she walked toward her car. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Lisa. "Girls' night at Murphy's bar? You better show up this time. And no excuses about being tired." Emma paused, her keys halfway to the car door. When was the last time she had done something just for herself? When had she last felt alive outside these hospital walls? A different kind of medicine. Murphy's bar sat tucked between a bookstore and a small cafe in the heart of downtown. The warm amber light spilling from its windows promised comfort and conversation. Emma hesitated at the entrance, suddenly aware of her simple jeans and sweater. Her face free of makeup except for a touch of lip gloss she had applied in the car. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with soft jazz music and the gentle hum of conversation. She spotted Lisa immediately, her red hair catching the light as she waved enthusiastically from a corner booth. "I can't believe you actually came." Lisa grinned as Emma slid into the seat across from her. "When's the last time you've been anywhere that wasn't the hospital or your apartment?" Emma laughed, the sound feeling foreign after hours of medical terminology and urgent whispers. "I'm here now, aren't I?" They ordered wine and caught up on life beyond hospital walls. Lisa worked in marketing and had endless stories about office drama and weekend adventures. Emma found herself relaxing, remembering what it felt like to be a woman in her 20s, rather than a medical professional carrying the weight of life and death decisions. The stranger's aside was while reaching for her wine glass that Emma noticed him. He sat alone at the bar, his profile strong and thoughtful as he stared into his drink. There was something magnetic about his presence, an air of quiet intensity that drew her attention despite herself. He wore a simple black button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his fingers through it repeatedly. But it was his eyes that captured her when he turned slightly in her direction. They were deep brown, almost amber in the bar's lighting, and they held a sadness that Emma recognized from her own mirror on difficult days. "Earth to Emma," Lisa teased, following her gaze. "Now that's what I call a distraction. You should go talk to him." Emma shook her head quickly. "I don't do that. I don't approach strange men in bars." "When's the last time you approached any man anywhere?" Lisa challenged gently. "You're beautiful, intelligent, and completely invisible to yourself. Maybe it's time to change that." The first words as if sensing their conversation, the stranger looked directly at Emma. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and she felt something electric pass between them. He didn't smile immediately, just studied her, face with an intensity that made her heart skip. Then he stood, left money on the bar, and walked toward their table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rich and slightly rough around the edges. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I couldn't help noticing you from across the room. You have the most expressive eyes I've ever seen." Lisa grinned and immediately stood up. "I was just heading to the restroom, Emma. This is your chance to practice being social." She winked and disappeared, leaving Emma alone with the handsome stranger. "I'm James," he said, extending his hand. "Emma," she replied, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. "May I sit just for a moment?" She nodded, and he slid into Lisa's vacant seat. Up close, she could see tiny lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and stress, the kind of expression that came from carrying heavy responsibilities. Conversations. "In the dark, you look like someone who's had a long day," James observed, his voice gentle. Emma laughed softly. "Is it that obvious? I just finished a 14-hour shift, and I'm pretty sure I still smell like hospital disinfectant." "Hospital?" His eyebrows rose with interest. "Nurse, emergency department. You something in healthcare as well?" he said vaguely, then leaned. Forward slightly, but let's not talk about work. Tell me something real about Emma, something that has nothing to do with your job. Most people, especially men she met, seemed fascinated by her medical stories or wanted to share their own health concerns. James wanted to know about her as a person. I used to paint, she found herself saying, before nursing school consumed my life. I loved watercolors. I painted landscapes mostly, trying to capture the way light changes everything it touches. Used to? James's eyes softened. What happened to the artist? Emma shrugged, feeling vulnerable. Life happened. Responsibilities. Medical school was expensive, and painting doesn't pay the bills. But it fed your soul, James said quietly. I understand that kind of sacrifice. Sometimes we give up the things that make us who we are for. The things we think we should become. The connection deepens. They talked for hours. Lisa returned briefly, took one look at the intense conversation, and whispered that she was heading home, leaving Emma with a knowing smile and a gentle push toward adventure. James spoke about traveling, about places he had visited where the light was so beautiful it made him think of paintings. He talked about books and music, about the way certain songs could transport you to different moments in time. He was intelligent without being condescending, thoughtful without being morose. Emma found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years. About her family, her dreams before reality set in, the moments in the hospital that restored her faith in humanity, and the ones that challenged it. You're not what I expected when I walked over here, James admitted as the bar began to empty around them. What did you expect? Emma asked, genuinely curious. Someone beautiful but distant, someone who would make polite conversation and then politely excuse herself. He paused, studying her face. Instead, I found someone real. Someone who sees the world in colors I'd forgotten existed. The decision the bartender called last call, and reality began to creep back in. Emma glanced at her watch, surprised to see it was nearly 2 a.m. I should go, she said, but made no move to leave. Should, James repeated. There's that word again. What do you want to do, Emma? She looked at him, this stranger who had somehow made her feel more like herself than she had in months. There was something between them, something rare and unexpected. She could feel it in the way he listened to her words, the way his eyes never left her face, the way the rest of the world seemed to fade when they talked. I want to not think about should for once, she said quietly. James smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him all evening. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and more carefree. My hotel is just around the corner, he said softly. No expectations, no pressure. Just two people who don't want the night to end. Emma felt her heart racing. This wasn't like her. She didn't go to hotels with strangers, didn't have spontaneous adventures, didn't follow her impulses. But something about James, about this night, about the way he had seen her as a person rather than a function, made her want to be someone different. A night of discovery, okay? She whispered, surprising herself. They walked through the quiet streets, their hands eventually finding each other in the darkness. The hotel was small and elegant, the kind of place that spoke of understated luxury rather than flashy wealth. In his room, he continued talking, sitting on the edge of the bed like teenagers sharing secrets. James made coffee from the small machine, and they watched the city lights twinkle through the large windows. I feel like I've known you for much longer than a few hours, Emma said, accepting the warm mug. Time is strange like that, James agreed. Sometimes a moment can contain an entire lifetime. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure at the same time. His touch was gentle but sure, reverent in a way that made Emma feel precious rather than merely desired. They made love slowly, carefully, as if they were both afraid of breaking whatever magic had brought them together. Emma had never felt so seen, so cherished. In James's arms, she wasn't the efficient nurse, or the responsible daughter, or the woman who had given up her dreams. She was simply Emma, beautiful and desired and worthy of tenderness. The morning after Emma woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the scent of coffee brewing. For a moment, she felt disoriented, then remembered where she was and why. James stood by the window, already dressed, his profile thoughtful, as he gazed out at the city. Good morning, she said softly, pulling the sheet around herself. He turned, and his smile was warm and genuine. "Good morning, beautiful. I was just thinking about what you said about light changing everything it touches." Emma felt a flutter of panic as reality began to reassert itself. She had work that afternoon, responsibilities, a life that didn't include mysterious hotel rooms and handsome strangers. "I should probably go," she said, though every part of her wanted to stay. James nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "I know. We both have lives waiting for us." They dressed in comfortable silence, the magic of the night settling into memory. At the door, James cupped her face gently in his hands. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing me as just James, for being exactly who you are." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for making me remember who that is." They parted with a kiss that tasted of coffee and possibilities, neither asking for phone numbers or making promises about the future. Some moments, Emma thought, as she walked to her car, were perfect precisely because they were complete in themselves. The return to reality back in her apartment, Emma showered and prepared for her afternoon shift. She tried to settle back into her routine, but everything felt different. The face in the mirror looked the same, but behind her eyes, something had awakened at the hospital. She moved through her duties with the same efficiency as always, but her colleagues noticed something different about her. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a softness to her smile that spoke of secrets and satisfaction. "You look different," her friend Jessica observed during their break. "Good, different. Like you've discovered something wonderful." Emma just smiled, touching her lips where James's kiss still lingered in memory. She had discovered something wonderful. She had rediscovered herself as she walked through the hospital corridors that night. Emma reflected on how one unexpected evening had reminded her that she was more than her job, more than her responsibilities. She was a woman capable of passion and spontaneity, worthy of tenderness and desire. She didn't know if she would ever see James again, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that for one perfect night, she had been fully, completely herself. And that was a gift she would carry with her long after the memory of his touch had faded. The white scrubs no longer felt like a uniform that made her invisible. They felt like armor that protected the vibrant, passionate woman underneath, a woman she was finally ready to acknowledge and embrace. Little did Emma know that her world was about to change in ways she could never have imagined, and that the stranger who had awakened her heart was about to become a permanent part of her carefully ordered life. Emma Rivera floated through her next shift at City General Hospital with an unusual lightness in her step. 3 days had passed since her encounter with James, and the memory of their night together continued to warm her from within. She found herself humming softly as she checked patient charts, her colleagues noting the subtle but unmistakable change in her demeanor. "Someone's in a good mood," observed Marcus, one of the veteran nurses, as Emma practically glided past the nurses' station. "Did you win the lottery or something?" Emma just smiled mysteriously, not ready to share her secret. How could she explain that a single night with a stranger had reminded her she was more than just her job? That for the first time in years, she felt truly alive? The emergency department buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Paramedics rushed in with patients, doctors barked orders, and the constant beeping of monitors created the familiar symphony of life-saving work. Emma moved through it all with renewed purpose, her patient care somehow even more compassionate than usual. The announcement at precisely 10 a.m. Dr. Harrison, the chief of staff, gathered the entire hospital staff in the main auditorium. Such meetings were rare, usually reserved for major announcements or policy changes. Emma found herself squeezed between Jessica and Marcus in the packed room, curious about what could warrant such a grand assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Harrison began, his voice carrying easily through the microphone, "today marks a significant milestone in our hospital's history. We are pleased to introduce our new Director of Medical Operations, a distinguished physician who comes to us from Boston General Hospital." Emma half listened, her mind still drifting to thoughts of amber eyes and gentle touches. New administrators came and went. Her focus remained on the patients who needed her care. Dr. James Wellington brings with him extensive experience in emergency medicine and healthcare administration. His innovative approaches to patient care and staff development have earned him recognition throughout the medical community. The name struck Emma like a physical blow. James Wellington. It couldn't be. The universe wasn't that cruel or that kind, depending on how she looked at it. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wellington to our City General family. The moment of truth, Emma's world tilted on its axis as a familiar figure stepped onto the stage. The same dark hair, now neatly styled. The same strong jawline, clean-shaven and professional. The same amber eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness just 3 nights. Go James Dr. Wellington looked every inch the accomplished medical director in his perfectly tailored suit. He moved with confidence and authority, a man comfortable. With command? This was not the vulnerable stranger who had shared coffee and conversations in a hotel room. This was a hospital director, a man with power and influence. Someone completely out of her league. Emma felt the blood drain from her face as the reality crashed over her. She had spent the night with her new boss, the mysterious James, who had made her feel so special, so seen, was now the man who controlled her professional future. Thank you for that warm welcome, Dr. Wellington said, his voice carrying the same rich tone that had whispered sweet words in her ear. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to elevate the standard of care at City General. His eyes swept the auditorium, and Emma sank lower in her seat, praying he wouldn't see her. But fate had other plans. His gaze found hers. Across the crowded room, and she watched his professional composure falter for just a moment, slight widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible pause in his speech, told her he was just as shocked as she was. The aftermath of the meeting continued, but Emma heard nothing else. She felt Jessica's concerned glances, saw Marcus trying to get her attention. But she was frozen in a nightmare of her own making. When the assembly finally ended, she bolted from the auditorium, pushing through the crowd toward the safety of the emergency department. Emma, wait up, Jessica called, catching up with her in the corridor. You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay? I'm fine, Emma lied, her voice barely steady, just tired. But she wasn't fine. Her mind raced with implications and possibilities, none of them good. What would James Dr. Wellington think of her now? Would he assume she had somehow known who he was that night? Would her colleagues find out? Would her professional reputation be ruined before it even began? The first encounter, Mom managed to avoid any direct contact with the new director for the rest of her shift, but she knew that inevitable confrontation was coming. She threw herself into her work with renewed intensity, trying to push away the growing anxiety that gnawed at her stomach. The next morning, as she was updating patient files at the nurse's station, she became aware of a presence behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could feel his familiar energy like electricity in the air. Nurse Rivera, came the formal voice she had once known, whispering her name in passion. Could I speak with you in my office, please? Emma's hands trembled slightly as she saved her work and turned to face him. Dr. Wellington stood there in his white coat, every inch the medical professional, but she could see the same turmoil in his eyes that she felt in her heart. Of course, Dr. Wellington, she managed, her voice professionally neutral. The walk to his office felt like a death march. Other staff members nodded respectfully as the new director passed, unaware of the tension crackling between him and the emergency department nurse walking silently beside him, behind closed doors. Dr. Wellington's office was spacious and elegantly appointed, with large windows overlooking the city. Emma stood in the center of the room, her hands clasped behind her back, waiting for whatever was to come. Please, sit down, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs facing his desk. His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the undercurrent of emotion beneath the professional facade. Emma remained standing. I prefer to stand, sir. The formality seemed to pain him. He moved to the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him in a mirror of her own posture. Emma, he began, then caught himself. Nurse Rivera, I think we need to discuss what happened 3 nights ago. There's nothing to discuss, Emma said quickly. It was a mistake, misunderstanding. I had no idea who you were. He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. Neither did I, but that doesn't change the fact that it happened. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and remembered touches. Emma felt the familiar flutter in her stomach as she looked at him, but she pushed it down. Ruthlessly, this was her boss now. Whatever had existed between Emma and James could not exist between Nurse Rivera and Dr. Wellington. I want to assure you, Dr. Wellington said finally, his voice carefully modulated, that what happened between us will have no bearing on your professional standing here. Your reputation as an excellent nurse precedes you, and I have no intention of letting personal matters interfere with hospital operations." Emma felt a stab of hurt at his clinical tone, though she knew it was necessary. "Thank you, sir. Appreciate your professionalism," however, he continued. "I think it would be best if we maintained appropriate boundaries going forward. I'll be conducting department reviews over the next few weeks. But I'll arrange for Dr. Patricia Manning to handle the emergency department evaluation to avoid any appearance of impropriety." "That won't be necessary," Emma said, lifting her chin with dignity she didn't feel. "I'm perfectly capable of maintaining professional conduct." Something flickered in his eyes, respect perhaps, or admiration for her strength. "I'm sure you are, but I think it's better this way. For both of us." Emma nodded curtly. "Is that all, Dr. Wellington?" "Yes, you may return to your duties." The new reality, the days that followed, were torture. Emma threw herself into her work with almost desperate intensity. But she was acutely aware of Dr. Wellington's presence in the hospital. She would catch glimpses of him in the corridors, hear his voice echoing from conference rooms, and each encounter was like a small knife twist in her chest. Her colleagues noticed the change in her demeanor. The lightness that had appeared after her mysterious night out was gone, replaced by a grim determination that worried her friends. "You're working yourself to death," Jessica observed during one of their rare breaks together.
"When's the last
"Time you went home before the end of your shift?" "I'm fine," Emma replied automatically, but she knew she wasn't. The memory of James haunted her, his gentle touch, his warm laughter, the way he had made her feel beautiful and worthy. Now seeing him transformed into the cold, professional Dr. Wellington, she wondered if any of it had been real. Unexpected moments. Despite their mutual efforts to maintain distance, fate seemed determined to throw them together. During a particularly busy evening shift, Emma found herself in the supply closet searching for additional IV supplies when the door opened and Dr. Wellington entered. They stood frozen for a moment. The small space suddenly feeling even smaller. Emma could smell his cologne, the same scent that had clung to her skin that magical night. She could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow that she had traced with her finger in the darkness. "I was looking for," he began. "I'll get out of." "Your way," Emma interrupted, moving toward the door. But he didn't step aside. Instead, he looked at her with an expression of such longing that her breath caught in her throat. "Emma," he said softly, forgetting protocol for a moment. "I need you to know that what happened between us, it meant something to me, more than I can express." Emma's heart ached at the pain in his voice. "It meant something to me too," she whispered. "But it can't mean anything now." He nodded slowly, understanding the truth of her words. "I know, but I needed you to know." The growing tension as weeks passed, the tension between them became palpable. To anyone paying attention, Emma noticed Dr. Patricia Manning watching them with keen interest during department meetings. Other staff members began to whisper about the new director's frequent visits to the emergency department. Though none suspected the truth, Emma found herself caught in an impossible situation. Her professional reputation was spotless, her patient care exemplary, but she was living with a secret that felt like it might consume her. Every interaction with Dr. Wellington was carefully choreographed. Every word weighed for its professional appropriateness. The worst moments were when she saw him being charming with other staff members, particularly the female doctors who clearly found him attractive. Dr. Rebecca Foster, an ambitious surgeon, seemed particularly interested in the handsome new director. Emma would watch from a distance as Dr. Foster laughed at his jokes and found excuses to seek his input on cases. And she felt a jealousy so sharp it took her breath away. The mask slips. The breaking point came during a medical emergency. An accident. Victim arrived with multiple trauma injuries requiring immediate surgery. Emma found herself assigned to assist in the operating room where Dr. Wellington was consulting on the case. Working together in the high-stakes environment of the OR, their professional masks slipped away. They moved with an intuitive understanding of each other's methods, anticipating needs and responding with perfect synchronization. For those crucial hours, they weren't boss and subordinate. They were two medical professionals working in perfect harmony to save a life. After the surgery was successfully completed, they found themselves alone in the scrub room, the adrenaline of the save still coursing through their veins. That was, Dr. Wellington began, pulling off his surgical gloves. Amazing, Emma finished, her eyes bright with the excitement of a life saved. For a moment, they looked at each other without the careful barriers they had constructed. Emma saw not the intimidating director, but the man who had held her so tenderly, who had listened to her dreams and fears without judgment. "We work well together," he said quietly, as she agreed. Then reality crashed back down. "But we can't. Not like this." The pain in his eyes mirrored her own. They both knew the truth that their connection was real and powerful, but the circumstances made it impossible. The resolution to fight that night, Emma made a decision. She couldn't continue living in this liminal space between her professional duty and her personal feelings. Something had to change. She wasn't sure what or how. As she walked through the hospital corridors at the end of her shift, she reflected on the impossible situation they found themselves in. She had found something rare and beautiful with James that night in the hotel, something she had never expected to find. But the revelation of his identity had turned that beautiful memory into a source of constant pain. She thought about Rebecca Foster's obvious interest in Dr. Wellington, about the way other staff members looked at him with admiration and respect. He belonged in their world of advanced degrees and professional accolades. Emma was just a nurse, skilled and dedicated, but ultimately replaceable. But as she reached the hospital parking garage, Emma remembered something James had said that night. "Sometimes we give up the things that make us who we are for the things we think we should become." Perhaps it was time to stop letting fear dictate her choices. The memory of their night together had shown her that she was capable of passion, worthy of love, deserving of happiness. The question now was whether she was brave enough to fight for it, even if it meant risking everything she had worked so hard to build. Looking up at the hospital windows glowing against the night sky, Emma made a silent promise to herself. She would find a way to reconcile the woman who had loved James with the nurse who respected Dr. Wellington. Somehow, she would find the courage to discover if what they had shared was strong enough to overcome the obstacles now standing between them. The night air was cool against her skin as she walked to her car. But for the first time since that shocking morning in the auditorium, Emma felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. The story of Emma and James wasn't over. It was just beginning a new, more complicated chapter. 2 weeks after the surgery that had brought them together professionally, Emma Rivera stood in front of her bathroom mirror, preparing for what might be the most important conversation of her life. She had spent sleepless nights weighing the risks, considering every possible outcome, and had finally reached a decision that both terrified and liberated her. She was going to tell Dr. James Wellington exactly how she felt. The woman looking back at her in the mirror was different from the one who had stumbled into Murphy's bar that fateful night. Her eyes held determination where once there had been resignation. Her posture spoke of quiet strength rather than invisible surrender. The night with James had awakened something in her, and the weeks of professional tension had only crystallized her resolve. She chose her outfit carefully, simple but elegant dress that made her feel confident without being inappropriate for the hospital setting. As she applied her makeup, Emma thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. He was her boss. The hospital had strict policies about relationships between different levels of staff. Her career could be ruined. Her reputation could be destroyed. But then she remembered his touch. The way he had looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, like the synchronicity they had shared in the operating room. Some things Emma had come to realize were worth fighting for. Emma had it all worked out. She would wait until the end of her shift, then go to Dr. Wellington's office. Would be professional, but honest, laying out her feelings while making it clear that she understood the complications. If he rejected her, at least she would know she had tried. If he didn't, well, they would figure it out together. But the universe, as Emma was learning, rarely followed her carefully laid plans. She was halfway through her shift when Jessica rushed up to her. At the nurse's station, her face flushed with excitement and concern. "Emma, you need to know what's happening," Jessica whispered urgently, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, immediately alert. "It's Dr. Foster. She's been telling everyone that she and Dr. Wellington have been having meetings, late-night consultations about hospital policy. And Marcus heard from someone in administration that she's been pushing for changes to the nursing staff structure. Emma's blood ran cold. What kind of changes? Rotating assignments? Moving people between departments? Some people think she's trying to consolidate power, maybe get rid of nurses she sees as problematic. The implication was clear. Dr. Rebecca Foster, with her obvious interest in Dr. Wellington and her ambitions for advancement, might see Emma as a threat to be eliminated. Whether she suspected anything about Emma and Dr. Wellington's past was unclear. But her actions suggested she was positioning herself to control the nursing staff. The confrontation Emma's resolve only strengthened. By someone who saw her as competition, she would not let fear dictate her choices anymore. But before she could make her move, fate intervened once again. During the busy afternoon shift, a massive accident brought multiple casualties to the emergency department. A construction site collapse had injured dozens of workers, and every available staff member was pressed into service. Emma found herself working alongside Dr. Wellington again, this time in the chaos of the emergency room rather than the controlled environment of the operating theater. As they worked to stabilize patients and coordinate care, their partnership was even more evident than before. Pressure bandage on the chest wound, Dr. Wellington called out, working on a patient with severe lacerations. Emma was already moving, the bandage in her hands before he finished speaking. Their rhythm was perfect, their communication almost telepathic. Other staff members noticed. How could they not? And Emma saw Dr. Foster watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. The moment of truth after the crisis had passed, and the last patient had been transferred to surgery or admitted to the ICU. Emma found herself alone with Dr. Wellington in one of the treatment rooms. They were both exhausted, their scrubs stained with blood and sweat. But there was something else in the air between them, a crackling tension that had nothing to do with medical emergencies. "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Dr. Wellington looked at her. She saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes, longing, frustration, and a deep sadness that spoke of dreams deferred. "Emma, we can't." "Yes, we can," she interrupted. "We can choose, can decide that what we have is worth fighting for." He stared at her, and she could see the war playing out in his expression: duty versus desire. Professional responsibility against personal happiness. "You know what this could mean," he said quietly, "for both of us." "I know what it means if we do nothing," Emma replied. "We become strangers who pretend not to feel what we feel. We let fear and other people's opinions dictate our lives." "I won't do that anymore, James." The use of his first name seemed to break something loose in him. His professional facade crumbled, replaced by the vulnerable man she had fallen for that night in the hotel. "The declaration, I haven't stopped thinking about you," confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "Not for a single day. Every time I see you in these hallways, every time we work together, it takes everything I have not to reach for you." Emma stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to catch the familiar scent that had haunted her dreams. "Then don't," she whispered. "Stop fighting it. Stop fighting us. Emma, if we do this, if we acknowledge what's between us, there's no going back. It's the hospital board, the policies, the politics. It won't be easy. It's nothing worth having ever is," Emma said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "Rather fight for something real than settle for safe and empty." The kiss that followed was different from their first knot, the desperate passion of strangers finding connection. But the deep, abiding love of two people choosing each other despite the odds. It tasted of hope and promise, and the courage to leap into an uncertain future together. The plan forward when they finally broke apart. Dr. Wellington James rested his forehead against hers, his hands tangled in her hair. "We'll have to be careful," he said. "Smart about how we handle this." Emma nodded. "I'm not asking you to sacrifice your career for me. I'm asking you to find a way we can both be happy and professional." "There are proper procedures," James said thoughtfully. "Disclosure to the board, potential department transfers, transparency. About our relationship, it won't be easy, but it's possible." "And Dr. Foster?" James's expression hardened slightly. "Dr. Foster's ambitions don't dictate hospital policy. If she's been spreading rumors or attempting to manipulate staff assignments for personal gain, that's something the board needs to address." Emma felt a surge of relief. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wouldn't face them alone. The resolution the following weeks tested their resolve. There were meetings with hospital administration, paperwork to be filed, and careful negotiations about their professional relationship. Emma was transferred to the day shift to minimize direct reporting conflicts. While James recused himself from her performance reviews, Dr. Foster's reaction was predictably hostile. But her attempts to undermine Emma only succeeded in exposing her own unprofessional behavior. The nursing staff who had watched Emma's dedicated work for years rallied around her, and Dr. Foster found herself increasingly isolated. The hospital gossip mill churned for a while, but the careful transparency of Emma and James's approach eventually diffused most of the speculation. They were professional at work, keeping their personal relationships separate from their duties, and their competence spoke for itself. The new beginning. 6 months later, Emma stood in the art supply store, selecting watercolor paints for the first time in years. James had surprised her with an easel and a set of brushes for her birthday, along with a promise that they would find a way for her to pursue both her nursing career and her artistic dreams. "You don't have to choose between who you were and who you've become," he had told her. "You can be both. You can be everything." Their relationship had evolved into something beautiful and sustainable. They supported each other's professional goals while nurturing their personal connection. Emma had discovered that love didn't have to mean sacrifice. The right person would help you become more yourself, not less. James had changed too. The rigid control that had once defined him had softened into confident leadership. He was still an excellent doctor and administrator, but he no longer felt the need to armor himself against human connection. Emma had shown him that vulnerability could be a strength. Letting people see his humanity made him a better leader. The perfect evening, on a crisp autumn evening, Emma stood at her easel in their shared apartment, painting the view from their window as the city lights began to twinkle in the growing darkness. James sat at the kitchen table, reviewing patient files, comfortable in their quiet companionship. "What are you painting?" he asked, looking up from his work. "The way light changes everything it touches," Emma replied, echoing the words she had spoken that first night they met. James set aside his files and came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist as they both looked at the canvas. The painting captured the golden hour light falling across the cityscape, transforming ordinary buildings into something magical. "It's beautiful," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "It's just like the woman who painted it." Emma leaned back against his chest, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. "Do you ever regret it? Taking the risk?" "Never," James said, without hesitation. "The only thing I regret is all the time we wasted being afraid." The final truths, as they stood together in the soft lamplight, surrounded by the evidence of their life together, immense paintings on the walls, James's medical journals stacked on the coffee table, photos from their recent trip to the Costa Ma, realized that their story had never been about a nurse and a hospital director. It had been about two people finding the courage to choose love over fear, authenticity over safety. The woman who had once disappeared into white scrubs had found her voice. The man who had once hidden behind professional walls had learned to let love in. Together, they had discovered that the best relationships weren't about finding someone to complete you, but about finding someone who inspired you to become your most complete self. Outside their window, the city hummed with the lives of millions of people, each fighting their own battles, seeking their own connections, hoping for their own moments of magic. Emma and James had found theirs, not despite the challenges they faced, but because they had faced them together. The light continued to change as evening deepened into night. But some things, like the love between two hearts brave enough to choose each other, remained constant, beautiful, and true. Their story, which had begun with a chance encounter and a night of unexpected passion, had become something even more extraordinary, a lifetime of choosing each other. Every single day, in all the small and large moments that make up a life lived fully and authentically. Emma smiled as she added the final touches to her painting, capturing not just the light on the buildings, but the light that had entered her life the moment she decided to stop being invisible and start being brave. And in that courage, in that choice to love boldly despite the risks, she had found not just happiness, but herself. The end.